This video is sponsored by Squarespace, the perfect all-in-one platform to build your own website and expand your online presence. It's always very hard to write a good series finale, especially for a sci-fi show where the protagonists have to face world-ending threats in almost every episode. So when you have a show like Torchwood, you need to craft a suitably climactic finale that feels as though it deserves extra weight compared to all those other dangerous monsters and villains. When it comes to the ending of Series 1, head writer Chris Chibnall had returned to the writing chair for the first time since his knockout episode Countryside. Unlike the parent show Doctor Who, Torchwood had a relatively clean slate because it had no defined series arc, so the finale had a lot of freedom to be something good. Chibnall's finale ended up being End of Days, picking up from the ending of Captain Jack Harkness where Owen opened the rift, dealing with the consequences of that decision on the entire world. This finale is a divisive one amongst fans for a number of reasons, most being common criticisms of the writer's work on Doctor Who in the years that followed. But what's really going on with End of Days? Does it end up being a satisfying series finale to wrap up character relationships? Or does its rushed ending and sudden CGI monstrosity make the episode too irredeemable to enjoy? Well, grab your rift manipulator and steer clear of Torchwood's own Scorpion King, because it's time to review End of Days. When Owen opened the rift in Captain Jack Harkness, he had no idea what would happen. It might have helped if he had looked on the Torchwood website first, but it's not exactly state of the art. You know what they should have made their website with instead? Squarespace! You've probably heard of Squarespace before, and for a good reason. It's an easy to use service which allows you to build your own website from the ground up, whether that be an artist portfolio or a home for your online business. You can even buy your own unique domain without any hassle or confusion, like I did. You're looking at the proud owner of www.harbowholmes.co.uk.
Google it.
Squarespace lets you pick all sorts of URL endings without hidden fees. It's honestly so easy. I have no web design experience, but I was able to make a website that looks slick and professional. It's that straightforward and accessible. You can set up photo galleries, mailing lists, and so much more, all with a few clicks. You'd be surprised at how much you can do. I found so much freedom within the design tools. It even automatically tells your website for mobile, so you don't have to go back and redo everything, which is a huge plus for me. I really recommend checking Squarespace out, so go to squarespace.com/harbowholmes right now for a free trial and 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Having a website is a must for every creative person these days, so thanks again to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. And now, on with the review. A common theme throughout Series 1 of Torchwood is Gwen trying to struggle to maintain a balance between her home life and her work life. This took a backseat in the previous episode because she wasn't featured much, but it immediately returns here as she and Reese try to have a normal morning, only for Torchwood to come calling, as tends to happen when this couple have downtime. I think it's a great touch that all Jack needs to say is,
"You watching the news?"
I feel like this is reminiscent of huge tragedies like 9/11, where scenes like these played out verbatim. A common conversation during that time seems to have been, turn on the TV. Oh, what channel? It doesn't matter. When an event as big as this happens, people immediately pay attention no matter where they are in the world, and I think this kind of framing is a good way to set up the scale of the issues playing out on TV. Also, Chibnall borrows Russell T Davies' trick of using TV as a narrative tool, since it allows for some quick and natural exposition, showing you all these things without feeling too shoehorned in. It always worked well when Davies used it in Doctor Who, and it's used great here by Chibnall. It helps show how severe and widespread these mysterious events are.
People didn't believe us. Now they should. Judgment Day is finally here. This is the end of days.
We got one! We got one, ladies and gentlemen!
It's not long before we get an answer as to what exactly is going on. At the end of Captain Jack Harkness, Owen made the risky move of opening the rift to save Jack and Tosh from the 1940s. All throughout the episode it was being hammered home how dangerous this would be, and now we get to see the aftermath, since these events and this chaos all traces back to one source: Torchwood. Owen is directly responsible for all of this. He single-handedly brought this doomsday upon the planet with his decision. However, I like that he sticks by it. Even though Jack is angry at him, they all know opening the rift was the only solution in that episode. There was no other choice. I feel like Jack forgets that Tosh needed rescuing more than he did. He could have easily just lived through the decades once again, but she'd have died if it wasn't for Owen. Throughout that episode and the one before, Owen has become increasingly distant from the team and butting heads with Jack, which happens again here. Both men are as stubborn as each other, but Owen challenges his superior, asking what he's going to do. This is nice because it's all well and good for Jack to stand there and judge others, but at least Owen did something in that last episode. He actually tried. This confrontation between the two has a ripple effect of its own because it further fractures the team. Gwen and Jack also getting in a bit of a spat. I said at the end of my Captain Jack Harkness review that they're no longer a united front, and this scene is great for cementing that division. They're at odds with each other and it only gets worse throughout. Jack not being a good leader and almost turning them against him because he loses control, later having disastrous consequences. We're then finally reunited with PC Andy, who we haven't seen since day one. I love how he's used here because he has to deal with an angry Roman soldier who stabbed 2 people. Gwen and Jack are familiar with these kinds of happenings, it's pretty much their bread and butter. But Andy has no idea what to do. He represents the normal people who have to face all these time anomalies. Also, I adore that his main concern is what rights the soldier has. A great little joke since that's what's more important to him than the world potentially ending. It's also good that he knows when Gwen is lying to him because he was her partner on the force for a long time. He knows how she acts in situations like these, so he doesn't fall for her tricks of pretending everything is all fine. They're characters who have a history, and moments like these show that so well. However, one Roman soldier is something you can deal with. What you can't deal with is the Black Death. Indeed, Tosh and Owen go to the hospital where they find that a woman from the 14th century appeared and infected dozens of people with the plague. Owen's reaction to this is absolutely sublime because he can barely even bring himself to say it.
It's the fucking Black Death, Tosh. She's infected Cardiff A&E with the plague.
You don't need to be a historian or a doctor to know how severe the Black Death was. One of the deadliest pathogens to ever appear on our planet, and even now it's not entirely curable, especially not on the scale in this episode with the rate of infection. It's the perfect use for Owen because he's the team medic. He's the doctor and knows all about diseases like this, so when he balks at the revelation, you know it's serious. Even he is out of his depth and blames himself for it because it wouldn't have happened if he hadn't opened the rift. I think using pathogens like these are good for showing the true consequences. It's one thing to have Roman soldiers walking about, but the true danger of a time fracture is all the bacteria and the invisible threats these people are bringing too. The plague is just a start, who knows what other monstrous diseases might come flooding through next. As a certain pandemic recently showed us, as a society we're very ill-equipped for sudden diseases, and that's what Owen is truly worried about, because it can only get worse from here.
People are dropping through time and they are going to bring every disease in history through your doors. So you better be ready.
There's another moment of the team fracturing as Owen demands Jack do something. This whole series, Jack has been the man with all the answers. He always swags in and saves the day. Well, apart from that one time. He's always going on about his team trusting and obeying him. So Owen is right to demand he step up and be this leader he always pretends to be. It's time to walk the walk and Jack can't do that. He has no answers this time, making him so fallible and human. So he does what any other human would, he blames someone else. Indeed, when called out for not being able to stop what's happening, he shifts the blame onto Owen, despite fully knowing his second in command opened the rift to save him and Tosh. It's here that the team pretty much completely shatters, and I love it so much. Jack is constantly going on about them needing to trust him, but Owen is right to bring up the fact he doesn't even exist. Why would you follow a man who does nothing but hide himself from you? It's not exactly a good way to build trust among your team. But instead of admitting his team is right to doubt him, Jack just fires Owen on the spot, showing that tyrannical streak he had in Cyberwoman when Yanto disobeyed him. He's completely lost control of his team and is just firing a key member in the middle of such a horrible disaster. I like how the scene is framed, Jack standing so far away from the other Torchwood members who almost united against him, even if they don't know it yet. It's a great visual representation of that dissension. It's hard enough to trust him because they don't know him, but now he's trying to rule by fear, tossing anyone who questions him out into the cold with the promise of a retcon erasing everything from their time within Torchwood. A truly horrific fate. It's also brilliant how Owen struggles to walk away, not being able to simply get in the lift and leave. This is all he has. He's beyond dedicated to his job, but now he has to leave it behind so suddenly like this, and Gorman plays the moment superbly.
All my memories erased. I don't know where or when, but he'll get me.
At the police station, Gwen saw Billis lurking in a cell, almost psychically talking to her about being sorry for something none of us know why. He's so eerie and ethereal, it's great. He's such a good, mysterious villain. They encounter him again in his shop, where it seems as though he takes antique clocks from throughout time to sell in modern day. However, his ability to traverse time leads to a brilliant line which draws parallels to Jack himself.
I can see the whole of history, but I don't belong anywhere within it.
Jack can live forever. He's gone through countless eras and generations, but he doesn't belong anywhere. He can never settle down, so he just keeps living until he has to move on again. But this then reveals his intentions to get Torchwood to fully open the rift, since he knows all about it and knows that's their only solution. I previously said he was a puppet master with a protagonist on strings, and here he's again conducting them. He's navigated them into this impossible position to begin with, and now he's cornering them yet again, knowing he'll win eventually. He targets Gwen in particular, manipulating her in a different way to the others. He shows her a chilling vision of the near future, Reese dead on the kitchen floor, not too dissimilar to Ghost Machine where she had the haunting premonition of herself with a bloody knife, instilling this deep fear of the future. Much like that episode, she tries to prevent the future, taking Reese to the vaults to protect him. They've had more than a few spats over the course of this series, and I like that he gets angry at her for doing this. It's similar to that argument between Owen and Jack. Gwen expects Reese to blindly trust her despite hiding so much from him. We know she's just trying to protect him, but this whole time she's been lying and cheating, becoming so distant from him, so you can totally understand why he's less than receptive to being locked in a cell and left alone with a vague request to just trust her. But that being said, you can understand why Gwen reacts this way. The vision felt so real, like in Ghost Machine, where we saw just how traumatic these kinds of visions were to the characters. Her attempts to prevent that previous vision only resulted in it playing out a slightly different way, because you can't stop time from happening. And that's exactly what happens again here, as Billis creepily teleports into the vaults and just shanks Reese without so much as blinking. This scene is so sudden, it's exceptionally done. It's that sinking feeling of Billis being so far ahead of our characters, orchestrating their every move and decision with ease. Even though Gwen tried to stop Reese dying, Billis still makes it happen because he's inevitable. There's simply no way to beat him, he's an unstoppable force despite feigning innocence back in the shop.
I am not your enemy.
It's also just shocking that Reese dies like this. I know it's a cliche for shows like these to kill off romantic partners of protagonists because it's a cheap way to add drama, but it's actually utilised properly here because it's a crucial plot point. Tosh saw a spectre of her mum claiming something was coming through the darkness, just like Susie also did.
Something moving in the dark, and it's coming. Jack Harkness.
Yanto encountered Lisa, who implored him to open the rift to save people. After getting fired, Owen saw Diane, who also begged him to open the rift because it will save her. Yanto is loyal to Lisa, and Diane means so much to Owen, so all these visions are the perfect bait to manipulate the characters. Everyone has been tempted by these visions of the ones they love, but Gwen has to physically experience the death of her boyfriend who she tried to protect. She's the main protagonist of the show, so it makes sense that she'd have the most extreme reasoning for the rift being opened. Eve Miles overacts Gwen's reaction a little bit, but she makes up for it in the following scene, and I respect what they're going for, because it is such a traumatic moment for the character, feeling directly responsible for Reese's death. This is what finally pushes Gwen over the edge, because it was all she had tethering her to reality, but now Torchwood has claimed that too.
This is what happens here. We all end up alone.
There's a certain coldness to Gwen in this moment that is magnificent. She's lost her compassionate human side and the pieces have fallen into place for her rejecting her leader, just like Owen did. She's in denial, expecting there to be something Torchwood can do, but there's nothing. Well, apart from opening the rift like Billis has been telling them all to do. Indeed, spurned on from his ghostly encounter with Diane, Owen returns and declares he's opening the rift. Earlier, Jack had challenged the rest of the team on whether they would stand with the disgraced medic, and they'd stayed silently loyal. Here though, they all decide to help Owen, turning on their leader and all playing a part in overriding the system so they can open the rift. It's the perfect payoff to this bubbling tension all throughout the series. Bit by bit, Jack's command has been eroded, and it comes to a head with this full-blown mutiny. He's actually right that the rift being opened is a bad thing, because it's exactly what Billis wants, but much like in Captain Jack Harkness, they're in between a rock and a hard place. There's nothing they can do about it. They just have to play Billis's game. These kinds of layers are what makes Torchwood so good sometimes. Decisions aren't black and white, you understand where both parties are coming from because they both have equally valid reasons for their decisions. Yet something has to give because they can't all have their way. They lose pretty often. The in-universe problem is that Jack has gone about it so disastrously wrong in every sense. He has made it beyond easy for them to betray him. It's not surprising when it happens, especially because he insults each one individually by bringing up their previous betrayals and moments of weakness throughout the series, which just makes them turn on him even more.
Because you're so in love with Reese that you spend half your time in Owen's bed.
Fuck you!
It's then that Owen shoots Captain Jack square in the forehead, just like the previous second in command did all the way back in Everything Changes. As Owen says,
I'm sick of people doubting me.
the thing I love about this scene is how similar it is to Cyberwoman, where Jack challenged Yanto in the same situation.
You make a threat like that, you better be prepared to follow it through.
This time, however, it's Owen, who couldn't be further from Yanto as a character since he has more conviction. You can't call a bluff like this when Owen is the one holding the gun, because he's so unpredictable, and this is another failure on Jack's part. Underestimating his team because he's lost within his own madness and skewed sense of morality. However, what I don't like about this is that as a viewer we know this kill means absolutely nothing in the grand scheme of things. Jack is immortal. It's cropped up in countless episodes with him constantly resurrecting and brushing off death. Yet this death is played off as a weighty and dramatic moment. Sure, it is for Owen, Tosh and Yanto, but the viewer and Gwen know he'll just come back to life, so it doesn't feel like an effective payoff to all that tension. Especially because he does immediately resurrect, pretty much negating him dying in the first place. I just feel as though it's a mishandling of his immortality gimmick in my opinion. Now that Jack is out of the way, the team proceed to open the rift, making this huge decision together as a team to regain everything they've lost to Torchwood and the rift itself, reversing time to erase all these crises around the world. It feels so blockbuster, the entire hub falling apart and exploding as a result of the power of this anomaly in space and time. It's a great climax to the episode, but that's the problem. It's not the climax. There's still Billis to deal with, who they encounter in some random alleyway for some reason. Now he reveals his master plan. This entire scheme was an elaborate ruse to unleash a dark being imprisoned within the rift. The so-called Son of the Beast, which implies this Abaddon fella is the son of the big red devil man from the Satan pit. It's all built up so well, only for it to cut to this.
Yeah.
Seriously, what the hell is this? It looks so stupid, but we're supposed to take it completely seriously. The music is all intense, and sure, the gimmick of everyone caught in his shadow dying is a cool way for him to feel like a massive threat, but the CGI is terrible. Actually, it's not even just the CGI. The design itself is awful in the first place. Why did it have to be this weird dog-faced demon thing and not some shapeless bringer of death instead? It would have been at least a bit more effective if it was more like Death in Series 2. I just feel like it devalues the stakes because it doesn't at all fit in the visuals of the show, especially because it's daytime rather than nighttime. It's too heavily CGI'd and just looks so goofy when it's stomping around Cardiff as if it's rehearsing for the next Godzilla ripoff. It has no physical weight and doesn't seem to affect any of its surroundings, so it's super out of place. It's trying to be too ambitious for its own good, and it really drags down the climax in my opinion. Gwen takes Jack out to a random field to do battle with Abaddon, who for some reason comes towards this one random man instead of the hundreds of thousands he's currently feasting upon. This is again a very silly visual, as the immortal man does battle with this ancient beast by just standing there screaming as the episode begs you to take this seriously. I hate to ring the Chibnall bad alarm, but this is the perfect example of why the writer struggles to craft satisfying endings. Everything up until the rift being opened was suitably dramatic, focusing on characters and interpersonal conflicts, but then he feels as though it's not epic enough yet, so he shoehorns in this monster out of nowhere, for not even than 5 minutes of screen time, and it's simply defeated by getting indigestion or something? It's a baffling conclusion to an otherwise gripping finale. It feels like it's been edited in from a different episode because it's so completely off and tonally inconsistent. It's a cool idea to use Jack's immortality as the solution to the problem, since it's been brought up heavily throughout the series, but it's just used so badly here. It feels comical with how it's shot and edited, like there's missing effects, but no, this is it. It's such a shame they do away with all the interesting riff stuff and replace it with a typical big evil monster in this way. The initial setup of the episode was so incredibly interesting and creative, but this climax feels cheap and you feel as though you've been cheated by the finale, since this is apparently everything the series has been building up to. A goofy demon with John Barrowman squirming around in a shadow trying to make it seem like he's locked in some epic battle. I just can't see anything good in the Abaddon stuff.
If Abaddon is a bringer of death, let's see how he does with me. If he feeds on life, then I'm an all-you-can-eat buffet.
After conquering Abaddon, Jack seemingly dies for good, the rest of the team giving up on the hopes of him resurrecting. I personally feel as though this would have worked better if they didn't know he could resurrect at all. Gwen stays for days on end to wait for him, which is wonderful, because she knows what he's capable of, but I think it would have been great if the other three had no idea what she was waiting for, watching on in confusion as she sits by him day in, day out. They all process the death in their own way, but they had just seen him come back from a bullet to the brain, so they should know it is possible. There are just other ways to make this post-action more effective for the characters, and I think it suffers from them having directly seen him come back before. However, I do like that when he does come back, he has a moment with each member, culminating in the emotional reconciliation with Owen, who he forgives, finally understanding he was too harsh on his second in command, because it was a truly impossible situation both times Owen opened the rift. It's great that he just breaks down in his leader's arms, racked with guilt for everything he did across these 2 episodes. Owen usually keeps his sadness to himself and bottles it up, turning it into anger or bitterness, but here he just lets go, no longer keeping that sarcastic front and allowing himself to break down. It's really gratifying for the character in my opinion, and shows he didn't really hate Jack, he was just doing what he believed was right.
We're relieving you of your command, Captain! We're opening that rift and getting back what we lost!
Jack returns to his desk now that he's back in command of Torchwood, noting that the rift is going to be more active than ever before after being opened, because you've got to tease Series 2 now. Jack admits he was the only one to not get any kind of vision to tempt him into opening the rift. Everyone else in the episode had one, but at this point in his life, he has nothing to live for because he can't die. He has no attachments and he's jaded underneath his exterior, although he also admits that a vision of the Doctor would have tempted him. I do wonder why that didn't happen. Possibly because the Time Lord would have been impossible for Billis to conjure up, or the villain just knew Jack would be too hard to sway. However, Jack then notices the disembodied hand he's been keeping is suddenly going nuts, just for that iconic groaning engine to chime in the distance, hearing the TARDIS for the first time in over 100 years. This beacon of hope he's been craving for so long. It's weird that the papers fly around like the machine is in the hub, despite Utopia later showing it was above the ground. I think it was confirmed that this was simply a production miscommunication, although there's probably a million different headcanon explanations. This is a phenomenal ending to the series, tying almost perfectly into Doctor Who Series 3, which would reunite Jack with the Doctor, so it's a good connection between the shows. However, my favourite part of the scene is actually the final shot, with this swell of triumphant music as the remaining Torchwood members wonder where their leader has gone. It promises more adventure to come. This isn't the end of Torchwood. These characters have so many more stories to tell. It sets up the mystery of Jack's disappearance, although I feel bad for anyone who didn't know Doctor Who answered that question. I just feel as though it's the perfect note to end Series 1 on, because even if Torchwood never continued, it's open-ended enough for endless imagination, while still being closed enough to be a satisfying conclusion. It's how most series finales should end, perfectly straddling the line between closure and sequel bait. End of Days is an incredibly strange finale to talk about. It's almost like it doesn't quite know what it wants to be, since it's stuck between this thrilling tale of the team fracturing under too much pressure, and this blockbuster epic about the end of the world as we know it. In the character department, it is exquisite, with truly incredible interpersonal drama and great individual stakes for every single member as they struggle with this impossible decision. The entire cast pulling off wonderful performances, paying off so many storylines and relationships. spin-offs. The stakes are suitably high and the initial threat is definitely suitable for a finale. However, the entire episode completely falls apart once the visually disgusting Abaddon shows up. It completely disintegrates because it ruins all that goodwill. It's shoehorned in and just feels like Chibnall didn't know how else to end the episode, because he thought opening the rift wasn't climactic enough on its own. Overall, I'd give End of Days a C rank on the Series 1 tier list. It's so good up until the climax, but then ends up being such a dissatisfying way to solve the crisis, although the post-action serves as a good ending to the series as a whole, with an exciting look forward to the future of the spin-off. People often criticise Chris Chibnall for being a first draft writer, and this definitely seems to be the case here because it suffers from the telltale pacing issues most of his Doctor Who work does. I can't help but feel like it should have been a two-parter with the Abaddon stuff being fleshed out more, with a dedicated episode rather than only 5 minutes. It's as if the episode falls short at the final hurdle, and that makes me so disappointed because it was so promising, similar to They Keep Killing Susie, where it just takes it too far and ruins everything near the end. The episode is enjoyable and entertaining enough to watch, so it's not exactly a disaster, but hey, it wouldn't be a Chibnall script without a horribly rushed climax now, would it? And I'd just like to give a very special thank you to my gold level patrons: Alex Marston, Calvin, Daniel Shillito, Franz Horn aka Line Vortex, John, Ross, Stephanie Ever Miller and William Jewell. Thank you so much for your support.